Well, hi everybody, it's the Week in the Tackle podcast, the podcast where we get together every week and tackle the things that we thought were interesting from the soccer and or football world. I think it was summed up quite nicely. I'm Tom Rennie, alongside me is former top footballer, these days top broadcaster, and a man in his 40s who looks like he's in his 20s. It's very, very annoying. It's Dunny, Brian Dunsteth. How are you, mate? You all right?
I thought for sure I was going to get a flat bill hat type of shot across the bow this morning, but here we are, Tom Rennie. Here, you keep saying this, and I appreciate the compliments because I don't feel young anymore. I just hit the age of 47. And between Tony Meola saying I turned 50 and between being inside the stadium before Snowmageddon between Real Salt Lake and LAFC, the end stadium announcer, Mike, they got me on camera in front of the whole stadium. I was getting a round of applause. It was really awesome. And Mike's like, happy birthday, happy 53rd birthday, Brian Dunsteth. And I was like, you mother... So yeah, I don't feel great either. I'm about to get this new hip. I can't wait. I'm dying over here. Pets' heads are falling off, and yeah, I just need 2 weeks to really speed up over these next 2 weeks.
Well, you do look great. You've got a wonderful complexion, and I'm really looking forward to recording that show when you're in recovery. I cannot wait. We're going to get Mrs. Dunsteth to hold a camera in front of you. We're going to get you mic'd up, and we're going to record a week in the drugs. It's going to be amazing. And you know what? I'm not even having surgery. I'm going to do a bunch of just to be on the same level as you. It's going to be an amazing show. That's a joke, by the way. Don't fire me.
Joke.
It's just a joke. It's a joke. That's a joke.
Joke.
We might cut that out. We won't. Sorry, Tim. Sorry, Tim, that. Anyway, let's move on. I want to talk about a bunch of things today, and you've mentioned it there, so why not start with it? It was infinitely memeable, the game between Real Madrid Salt Lake and Los Angeles FC. Tell us a little bit about the playing conditions. For those that haven't seen this, this was like playing in thick, white North Pole snow. And a lot of people, I imagine Hugo Lloris as well, the former French #1 and captain who was playing golf for LAFC, was thinking to himself, the f*** am I doing in Utah? Sorry, Tim. Why was this game allowed to be played? And why have Americans, you included, been so keen to highlight this game to show us why you're all Timmy Toughnuts and we're Philly, I suppose. I don't know.
Sorry, Tim. Yeah. Listen, as you were saying that, I pulled up the highlights, and the average for MLS highlights average somewhere between 15 and 30,000 views, right?
Yeah.
Real Salt Lake versus LAFC, snow goals in winter wonderland, full highlights 2 days ago, 213,000 views. Yeah. So Max Brados and I were on the call. It was Saturday morning. I left for the game. It was all of a sudden, like, it's been beautiful all week. It was hovering like in the 50s. And then Friday night, this wind started, and it got pretty windy. And then the projections were kind of 20 to 40 mile an hour gusts of wind as a storm was about to blow through. You have to understand, what people forget about Salt Lake City is it's almost the exact same altitude as Denver, Colorado. It's just under mile high.
Oh, right.
So we're roughly between 5,000 and I guess about 9,000, 10,000, 11,000, depending on what peak you're on. So as the wind was kicking up, the idea was, okay, we know there could be snow in the afternoon. The game will kick off. We'll be fine. But what happened was there was some serious concern with stadium security and personnel that because the wind gusts were so high, there was stuff flying around. And it was significant enough to put some fear of safety in jeopardy of the fans coming in the stadium. So they kind of delayed entrance to the stadium till they kind of really made sure nothing was going to fall off the stadium, which I thought was really smart. So they opened up the gates.
People are queuing up outside in the snow for hours to get in.
No, so there was no snow at this time. It was just windy. It wasn't even really that cold. It felt like it was in the 50s.
Right.
But what happens here, because we're in the mountains and this is basically a valley, once a storm drops over that mountain, you can feel it significantly drop in like a split second. So they let the fans in about 12 o'clock. They go through warm-ups. Everything's great. No precipitation whatsoever. And then they kick off. And as they kick off, there's just like a slight little drizzle, and there's a lightning bolt. And the lightning bolt, so in Major League Soccer, if a lightning bolt hits within 8 miles in the vicinity of an MLS stadium in a circular motion, They shut it down, and you have to wait immediately 30 minutes. So what happened was it was northeast of the stadium, and the wind kind of blows from southwest to northeast. So it was on the other side of the stadium. So it was kind of like, well, hold on, you're like 6 miles out. It's going that way. The
Did you
threat
see
of
it?
thunder.
Did you see it?
Yeah,
First?
yeah,
All right.
no. Well,
Right.
so it was actually at my house against the mountain where we live. It was snowing, and there was a and Jade was like, "Oh my God!" Like there was a lightning bolt that just like lightning just flashed in this snowstorm. And she goes, she sent me a text. She goes, I've never heard of thunder and lightning during a snowstorm. I just looked it up. It's called Thundersnow. And I
What?
was like, thunder snow is what it's called when it's snowing and there's lightning and thunder,
That's such a better name than Real Salt Lake.
right?
That's
Thunder
what they could have been.
Snow
Thunder,
FC.
Thundersnow, Salt Lake FC. Oh,
Yeah. Oh, how about this? Thunder Snow Soccer Club.
oh,
Maybe
it's
that's the
so
new
good.
nickname.
It's
Yeah.
so good. Why are they not doing that?
Yeah.
You've got the power. Get over
Yeah.
there right now and pretend that Florentino
Well,
Perez has changed his mind. He hates it there now. He'd never
it,
go to Utah on holiday again.
well, I don't think he will
Wherever it
anyways,
was.
because the jerseys are very much more Barcelona than they are
Yeah.
Real Madrid at this point.
That's where they
But
went wrong.
that's
That's where they
but
went wrong
do you,
after all these years. Now we know.
randomly, do you know where the claret and the cobalt colors come from for Real Salt Lake?
No, go on.
So claret and cobalt represent University of Utah and BYU. And so when they came, they didn't want to distinguish or separate and just go one color that might be red, that's University of Utah, or one color that might be blue, which is very BYU, aka Mormon. So what they did is they kind of mashed them all together, and that is your formula for the claret and
But
cobalt.
that's another reason why the club makes absolutely no sense. Because if they wanted to be Real Madrid America, they could have used white,
Well,
which
so
would have
so
been a neutral color. No,
let me take you back. For Dave Checketts, when that initial relationship started, it was because
he had fucking paella once. Sorry, Tim.
well, it was because there was business dealings happening in Spain, and that's how actually Real Madrid. It was basically like when Real Madrid came to, and this is Galacticos era, right? This is Ruud van Nistelrooy, Sergio Ramos, this is Roberto Carlos, David Beckham, blah blah blah. They came to Salt Lake City. I know we're way off track here.
Yeah,
but at that time,
they never came back. They never came
Real
back.
Madrid going to Salt Lake City was like the New York Yankees going to Timbuktu. Like, what? What? Okay, great. So that was kind of my analogy. I thought it was pretty funny back in the day. It still hits in 2024, even though it was really like 2006, 2007.
Still works.
Good
so
anyways,
material is good material. You don't write
thank you. I
jokes.
appreciate it. Specta. So 30-minute delay, lightning bolt. The idea was the game was still, if they kicked off, it would still avoid a majority of the snow. Well, because of the delay, it took a little bit longer. Obviously, listen, the first 45 minutes, it was snowing. It's nothing different than you would see in the Bundesliga, or maybe you would see up in Scandinavia, Denmark, Norway, Sweden, even Finland. You see it in Russia every once in a while. Orange ball came out, not that big of a deal. But the second half was some significant snow that was falling. Listen, I love Stevie Cherundolo. I played with him on the Olympic team, the national team. Pablo Mastroeni was my teammate. These are the two head coaches for LAFC and Real Salt Lake. Stevie popped his top. First 45 minutes, LAFC got completely taken apart. Had nothing to do with the snow. Yes, the snow was falling, but it didn't really have major implications on the way the ball was rolling, the weight of the passes, any of that stuff. Second half, listen, it was a lot of snow. And so then I'm sympathetic to thinking about the decision makers behind the scenes, because it's not just pausing the game. It's thinking about LAFC on a Saturday, what their flight schedule looks like, what the hotel schedule looks like, what the dietary needs for providing food looks like. It's about scheduling all the airplanes. It's about planes, trains, and automobiles, of getting people around, thinking about, do you play on Sunday? Do you kick the can down the road when you know there's going to be more tournaments? You got CONCACAF Champions Cup happening right now, which kind of maybe draws some different attention, although those two teams aren't playing. You've got Leagues Cup down the line. There's just a lot of things happening. So they ended up.
Was the ball rolling? You were there. Was the ball rolling?
Yeah, no, it was. It was.
Was it? Did it detrimentally affect the second half to the point where, if it wasn't for all of that, you might have called it off?
I don't think it was. Listen, if you're LAFC, you wanted the game postponed, paused, whatever, or maybe you just didn't want it played at all. I think if that lightning bolt hadn't hit, there wouldn't have been an issue whatsoever. It would have been snowing in the second half, but Real Salt Lake has played on snow on a couple of different occasions. I've been lucky enough to call some great games where it's like 50 degrees at kickoff and it's like orange ball and snow, and you've got Dan Farnes and the crew at Real Salt Lake shoveling the lines and, like, making sure the penalty area was decent enough that the referee had a look. Not ideal conditions. Mentality monster in the second half. LAFC was much, much better. But that first half, listen, Real Salt Lake was just a better team. So
Yeah.
when it's all said and done, LAFC doesn't get anything out of it outside of being healthy. Real Salt Lake gets a lot out of it because not only did they win and beat arguably the team that's had their number from day one, because LAFC was like 6-1-0 at Real Salt Lake since 2018. And a couple of those were like 5-1 wins. So just a lot of positives. Overall, a great weekend. Luis Suarez gets 2. Lionel Messi gets 2 in the Florida Derby against Orlando City. That was a complete demolition. There's some really good teams that we're watching kind of figure out how to navigate CONCACAF Champions Cup. You've got FC Cincinnati playing Monterrey this week. That's going to be the return of Brandon Vasquez, who is sold to Monterrey. He's got 5 goals down in Liga MX. He's going back to the best team in the league last year, where they're going to play this Wednesday out in Cincinnati. There's just a lot of great storylines early in the MLS season that we're looking forward to. But 214,000 now currently on YouTube.
And counting. What do you call it again? Thunder sludge. What was it?
Thundersnow.
Thundersnow. So the new cliche isn't can you do it on a rainy Tuesday in Stoke? It's can you do it on a thunder snow Saturday in Salt Lake? I like that. I'm going to use that.
By the way, really quick, because you brought up Stoke. Did I tell you Christian Benteke? I got to spend like 20 minutes with Christian Benteke down in Miami for MLS Media Day. So my first question, we did this thing where we'd roll dice. And so you obviously you have what was it, 2 through 12.
Wait, did you do like marry kill with Benteke? What are you telling us here?
So we had a dice.
Sorry, Tim.
We had dice, and we created questions, and these questions would start like our interview. So it was really awesome. I'd say you determine what the first question and the direction of the interview was. And so I did it with Insigne. I did it with like all the guys like Diego Rossi, all these players.
Everyone you've spoken to started the season well. Coincidence?
Yeah, well, I'm just saying. We actually talked to Benteke the other day. So Benteke, first question, he rolls the die. I think it was like 7, and he said, and I said, where is the most difficult place that you've ever played, either domestically or internationally in your career? That's a pretty broad range of games that he could say. Stoke City was his answer. And I go, shut the fuck up. And sorry, Tim. And he goes, no, I'm serious. I was like, so can he do it on a cold Tuesday, windy, rainy night at Stoke City? And he goes, dude, you have to understand, their defenders are like 6'4". All they do is play direct. All they do is have some guy that can throw a ball 100 yards with throw-ins. And it was with the wind, with the pounding rain, like the most mentally difficult place that I was just like, can he do it in a cold, windy, rainy night in Stoke on a Tuesday? Yeah. And I was like, well, okay, well, maybe that was fair for Pep Guardiola back in the day.
I mean, there was a time when that cliche was absolutely true, when it was Tony Pulis and Daddy Higginbottom and Ryan Shawcross and Rory Delap and Ricardo Fuller, Kenwyn Jones, some good players in that particular system. Breck Shea, yeah.
Jeff Cameron.
Back end of those days. That was more like the Kurt Zuma time when they got relegated. Anyway, let's move on. Yes, let's move on. I wanted to ask you a little bit about the Liverpool game this weekend and see your view on this, because look, it's a huge game for Nottingham Forest, right? And this week coming up, I think Thursday this week as we record, they're going to have their hearing for how many points they're going to get deducted. So they might get the 10 like Everton did, reduced to 6 at some point. We don't know what's going to happen, but they are going to get a points deduction that's going to put them in the bottom 3 this week. I think they're 4 clear as we're talking. So there's a reason why Evangelos Marianakis, the owner, was on the field trying to tuck his shirt in desperately as per usual, trying to have a, we are told, polite word with the referee post-match, but we will see. Anyway, end of the game. Referee does make a little bit of a mistake, right? It is a mistake from the referee. There is a head injury of sorts, believe it or not, whether it's a head injury, whether he's putting a bit of sauce on it, whatever, Canate. The referee has to stop it, as he's absolutely right. Any head injury, don't take risks. You know, as there are proven
laws of the
links,
game. Laws of the game.
There are proven links between head injuries and degenerative brain disorders. That is proven. So that is now part of the law of the game. You get a head injury, we stop it, right? Fair enough. The issue here is the referee who was Paul Tierney, he was meant to hate Liverpool. What he does is he waits to blow the whistle until Callum Hudson-Odoi has got it in his possession. As he has got it and Forest are on the attack, he's meant to give it back to Forest. He gives it back to Liverpool. 2 minutes later, Liverpool score. Now, a lot happens between incident A and incident B. And so how much of an effect does it really have? Fine. But what did you make, Dunny, to A, the fact that the referee did make a bit of a howler, B, 2 minutes later, Liverpool score a 99th minute winner with the time added on because of Konate's injury, and C, the reaction post-match by the people at Forest, including the owner, who apparently does come pitchside every now and then post-match to congratulate the players. They never win at home, so what for, I don't know. But he does come pitchside and try and at least have, let's say, so we don't get sued, a conversation with the referee.
Yeah. So when I saw the head injury, I was surprised at the length of time that the referee allowed the game to continue. And I know it's a very unique balance, and there's somewhat still of a gray area, even though it is there's a heavy desire to make sure that the whistle's blown immediately if there is a head-to-head collision. But at the same time, there's still a little bit of dark arts that come along with, and I just think that there has to be a little bit of a leniency with understanding how quick to the whistle the referee is. And also remember, there's an ongoing conversation with his ARs and his fourth officials in terms of communication. Like I would imagine if he doesn't have a great view, is he saying, is it real? Is he okay? Is it with head to head? What is that? Did he get hit in the face? Blah, blah, blah. Because the reality is players manipulate the game, right? Players go down easily and they try to get calls in their favor. But when the possession is then in favor of Nottingham Forest, one would think that then the drop ball goes back to Nottingham Forest for possession. Now, listen, context, Liverpool is in the midst of trying to win a Premier League trophy. Fair play idea is great. Everybody's awesome. We're all friends. Just not the case. And on top of that, it's a good amount of time. Again, I get it. We had a similar situation in Kansas City where the ref, it missed that it was going to be a Kansas City throw in, gave it to the opponent, to Philadelphia. Philadelphia take the throw. They get a corner off it. The ensuing corner, initial clearance from the goalkeeper, Alejandro Bedoya, 95th minute, game 1-1. Kansas City's like, what the flying squirrel? That was our ball. That led to a corner, which leads to the goal. There was more immediacy in that as opposed to the immediacy in this, but listen, didn't clear their lines good enough, didn't put any pressure on the service whatsoever, didn't mark Darwin Nunez either in front or in the back or goal side, and goalkeeper couldn't get a touch to it. So there's a lot more than just the drop ball that leads to the goal, but I can understand the complexity of the conversation and the argument when you feel like everything's going wrong and you are still within that touch point of relegation. You've already changed your manager, and in the back of your mind, you know that there's going to be a potential punishment coming your way. A point is a point is a point, especially against a massive club like Liverpool. But then you get into Marinakis on the sideline. Listen, in the world of football, you have owners that go down to the sideline and shake the hands. I just believe there should be a ban. I don't think that anybody that's not a part of the playing staff should be anywhere near the field. I would even suggest I don't even want them in the hallways while the players are walking to the locker rooms. I would even suggest there should be a cooling off period because it's something that we have here in Major League Soccer where they actually close access to the hallways from the tunnel. When you walk up the tunnel and the teams split, there's like a 10-minute window where they'll close everything down so the players can go back and forth, mingle, enter, exit without anybody kind of walking through, any type of press walking through, any of that. So then you're deleting the ability for any type of interaction, not only with the players, but with the referees as well, because the referees have to go through the tunnel and head to their respective rooms. Finally, in a way, I think it's genius that Marinakis has hired Mark Clattenburg to be his PR piece, because what he's effectively done is he's taken away the ability of the authorities to fine him and or suspend him or anybody associated with the immediacy of Nottingham Forest, because now you have Mark Clattenburg, respected referee, pundit, and host of whatever the television game is now.
Star referee of Gladiators.
Gladiators, maybe on hiatus. But then you have him coming out and saying, which morality-wise, referee to referee, like, I don't know. He was fudging the lines a little bit, let's say. Um, then it effectively takes away the ability of everyone to find the club. So in a way, it's genius. I still don't like it. I think it's kind of shisty, but what do I know? At the end of the day, it'll be very, very interesting to see if there's a way for the authorities to tighten the screws on the rules of representation of a club going forward.
Mm.
Because I think it's a very creative thing that he's done, Marinakis, with hiring Clattenburg. But you still need some checks and balances from something like that because you're effectively allowing this guy to go out and say, he fucked up, he fucked up, he fucked up. We've been hard done. Sorry, Tim, sorry, Tim, sorry, Tim. And effectively completely get away with it for free.
I mean, you hire an advocate, right? This is why governments and political parties, they hire individuals to lobby for them, and they put them into like think tanks, which are funded by oligarchs, and then they create policy. Mark Clattenburg is a hired advocate in order to represent them when things go wrong of this ilk. And maybe there'll be some repercussions from it for PGMOL.
Let me ask you this. Is there anything different than Mike Dean being hired on as to be a television pundit? And I know it's more of a broad stroke because he's not quote unquote immediately hired by a team, so his morality, his convictions aren't compromised, but he's there being the rules expert, putting his opinion on decisions by referees and or managers' decisions. I don't know how much of a difference it is, but it just feels like the lobbying expertise of Clattenburg specifically for Nottingham Forest kind of delves past that gray area, if you will.
Yeah, I mean, I don't have an issue with either, really. I quite like Mike Dean being on TV and throwing every single referee he's ever known under the bus for every decision. Wasn't that happy about him saying he thought Calvin Phillips was crap. I mean, I agreed with him, but I'm not sure, why he's at the table saying that. But I quite like him being involved in the commentary because unlike What's His Chops, who was doing it for the last couple of years, he's interesting, you know him, and he's happy to tell everyone that they're wrong, as he always was. So I quite like that. In terms of Clattenburg, I don't mind him being hired as an advocate. I just don't really think it's going to have that much effect because Paul Tierney makes a mistake. Them's the breaks. That's the way it goes. It's always been the case in football. Listen, let me keep you on Forest for a second because in January, Everton and Forest were both charged with breaching Premier League profitability and sustainability rules. That's what's going to happen this week, and we're expecting a further points deduction for both. Forest to happen maybe as early as next week. There'll then be an appeals process. There'll then be the potential of the week after the season finishes, there being a case of some ilk in the appeal where it gets reduced or whatever's going to happen. So we might post-season find out who's relegated and who's not, which is going to be a monumental, ridiculous mess. You throw that into the news from Tuesday that Aston Villa have reported a loss of £119.6 million in their latest accounts up to the 31st of May 23. As the profitability and sustainability rules, you can only have £105 million loss in a 3-year spell, which means Villa need to cover those losses this year, basically, in either player sales or Champions League qualification or whatever it is. Otherwise, they're going to be a whole heap of trouble 2 years down the line. And I suppose my question is, I'm not asking you to delve deeply into this because, we'll need hours and hours and hours, and you'll do it on the football show, I'm sure, as we'll do it on, the football show, the counter-attack is for you, of course, that's your show. But loads of other things. And we might do a long show on this at some point on Week in the Tackle. But I'm just looking at this. And there was a story this morning about Leicester City could be in trouble as and when they get promoted this year in terms of their loss over a 3-year period, which they still would have needed to adhere to, even though they spent 1 year in the Championship. And I'm just looking at this thinking, if we're in a situation, Dunny, going into this season where Forest and Everton are getting points deductions, next season it could be Villa and Leicester and maybe Everton and Forest again if they stay up, they're all getting points deducted for not adhering. And yet Manchester fucking City, sorry, Tim, are in a situation where, look, whatever's happening with their 115 charges, just look at their bench in the Manchester derby. It's A-OK for them to have Julian Alvarez, Manuel Akanji, Mateo Kovacic, Josko Gvardiol, Mateus Nunez on their bench, all signed for like £50 million or whatever on average. And yet they're not in trouble. And yet Aston Villa, who are trying to compete with them, which is almost impossible to do, might have to sell them, Ollie Watkins or Douglas Luiz, to balance the books, trying to compete with them. It just feels like we are getting so much evidence now that these rules are not fit for purpose, and we need different regulation because this is not working.
What did you say the number was for Aston Villa? 131?
It is. Hang on, I've just changed the page to get my other note. Hold on. It is
Damn it.
£119.6 million they have lost in their accounts to the end of May 23.
And
You're allowed to
105 is
lose
the number.
105 across a
Okay.
3-year period. So there's
So
other
for
losses from the previous year they might need to
yeah,
cover as well.
so 14, 15 million isn't that big of a number that they have to make up. So one would think that they're going to figure out a way, unlike Richarlison from Everton to Tottenham, and unlike Nottingham Forest with Brennan Johnson to Tottenham, that even though they'll not be able to maximize the value of the player, that's not a 50 million pound-esque type of move. So
Yeah.
not that they're not
going to basically make profit next year. They need to make
yeah.
a decent amount of profit, and I don't know what the previous year was like, but there needs to be a balancing somewhere.
Well, and I would say that as much as we're going to talk about Aston Villa, Leicester City, I'm going to put Man City in a different pot right now. I would say Chelsea is most certainly going to be in a similar situation. Why we saw Broja or Broja, depending on if you're English or not, in his £4 million move instead of a 44 million loan move as opposed to £40 million move, and even the idea of Conor Gallagher going for 80 million, which was lunacy, to Tottenham. Daniel Levy and those type of very, very smart decision makers, they're going to hold you over the pork barrel for whatever the true value is of what the player is versus knowing that you're in big, big trouble. The Man City thing. So my theory on the Man City thing, different than profit and sustainability, but has roots in how they've gotten to this point, right? I've been thinking about this lately. I just wonder if the reason why we've seen such a long, undetermined amount of time between the accusations of these breaches versus why we haven't seen the end nowhere near in sight is everybody on the charging side has realized the true aspect and how huge of a challenge this is going to be, not only to prove what the initial charges were, but then thinking about what inevitably the appeal is going to look like and what the knockdown of the charges is going to be. So I'm just thinking that they're taking their sweet time, just making sure that they have every T crossed, every I dotted, every bullet point that they possibly can tightened to make sure that when the day of reckoning does come for Man City, if it does get to that point, which it seems like it's inevitable, that they are going to make sure they have every single shred of proof that they can to see whatever the documents are that they initially said. But this one, listen, I get your point. It's truly taken. It's one of these world things. I would use your point about Man City similar to what we saw at PSG a couple of years ago when they're signing Donnarumma, they're signing Sergio Ramos, they're signing Neymar, they're signing Lionel Messi, yada yada yada. That summer will go down as arguably the best summer transfer window for every team that has ever played football, and yet a complete disaster and dismantling 2 years later.
No, I mean, you're absolutely right. And this is always to come back to it that Guardiola is a genius and they have done well in the transfer market to buy good players. And I don't take any of that away from Guardiola, the individuals, their performances. My love for Kevin De Bruyne is well documented. I don't take any of that away. But the other teams are trying to level the playing field and they simply can't. Because look at Wolverhampton Wanderers, for example. I was reading an interview with Gary O'Neill in the Guardian newspaper at the weekend. And he was basically saying, look, Lopetegui didn't want to stay here because they couldn't buy anybody because they had to balance the books this summer. They sold Mateus Nunes to be squad member 17 at Man City for £60 million, their best player, to 8 starts for Man City. They had to do that. They couldn't bring anybody in. And then suddenly they were 8th for a couple of days 2 weeks ago. And what they're short of is a goal scorer. And if they could have bought a goal scorer in January and they had a couple of people they wanted to bring in, they may well be looking at Europa League football, right? Europa League football brings in another 10, 15, 20 million pounds next year, as it did to them 2 or 3 years ago, but they couldn't do it. They couldn't bring in a just above average striker for 10 million pounds. They couldn't even do the Brozier thing, who went on loan to Fulham. They couldn't afford to do it. Whereas Man City could just take their best player and not play them. And if they haven't broken a single rule if they haven't broken a single rule, and let's hope they haven't, right? This is still fucked. Sorry, Tim. This is still completely wrong. And if half the teams are getting points deductions, trying to keep up with that sovereign wealth fund, and even if the sovereign wealth fund has done everything right, we are still in a position where something is wrong. And I think some better regulation needs to be brought in.
But
and we,
you know what's going to
I don't
happen.
know what the answer is.
Can we just look into the glass ball and just think that Michael Emenalo and Saudi Arabia are going to have a massive, massive effect on what this summer looks like?
Yeah.
Just like they did last year.
Dan
just
Burn to Al whoever the for 400 million?
No, I mean, and not just Newcastle to Saudi Arabia. I mean, for example, like if you're Unai Emery or you're part of the leadership at Aston Villa, why wouldn't you pick up the phone to Michael Emenalo and say like, hey, by the way, here's the situation we're in. We need roughly 15 million pound by June 30th. Who are you most interested in?
Yeah.
And let's like negotiate. I can see a way around this. I really can.
The trouble with that, and I do want to move us on. The trouble is, I don't know if you've seen any of the new Amazon program about the players' wives. What is it? Married to the Game, which is coming out soon, which you have to watch. If you watch the Arsenal one, you've got to watch this. It's the one you may have seen the video doing the rounds of Jorginho's wife saying, "You're not going to propose to me today, right? Now, wife, girlfriend, then." And he's like, "No, it's all right." And she's like, "Okay, I'll put something else on then." Or like James Tarkowski is sitting on a sofa with his wife, and they're like, "Oh, what do you like to do together?" And they're like, "Shagging," which is just great. I don't know if it's out yet. I'm going to watch it. I
saw some of the clips. Yeah,
it looks pretty good. But one thing that actually was quite serious from it, which I actually am really interested in, is Riyad Mahrez's wife, who is the daughter of I think Ashley Ward, who used to play for Barnsley, the centre forward. And she basically was really upset about going to Saudi Arabia, and she was having moments where she called up to a hotel reception and says like, "Oh, I'm bringing my daughter down to the pool. Is that all right if we come to a swim?" And they responded, "Your daughter? You can't come. You're a woman?" Just stuff like that, right? So I do think the Saudi Arabia thing is absolutely right in one respect. I think the rubber is meeting the road on that score, and people are realizing, oh, it's not Dubai.
Adaption.
You can fly to Dubai, you can fly to Abu Dhabi and have a bit of fun. If you've got to live in a suburb of Saudi Arabia, it's not going to be fun for you if you're a housewife of Cheshire. Listen, I want to move us on to two other quick stories, Danny, before we're out of time this week. The Real Madrid game, the end of Real Madrid-Valencia, where it is 2-2, time's up, a cross comes in from the right-hand side, Jude Bellingham rises, and Real Madrid are about to win the game. The referee has a quick glance at his watch. Yes, time up that. And he blows it when the ball is in midair before Bellingham scores. Now, two schools of thought. Number one, when the game is up, the game is up. You can't give extra time just because a goal might be happening. If you've timed it at like 90 and that's it, that is the rule of the game, the laws of the game. The other half would be he was about to score a winning goal. It's an arbitrary amount of time anyway. There's no way you've got this entirely accurate. Why would you not let this goal stand?
And there's a VAR. And there was a VAR look in the suggested added time at the end of the game.
Oh, was there?
Oh, yeah. So we do 3 up, 3 down on Mondays. This was obviously one of my down. And I just wrote, what the f-? Emphasis on f-. Sorry, Tim. Okay, listen. If it's a Real Madrid perspective, at the end of the day, Girona loses. Barcelona's not doing well. They lost Pedri and Frankie de Jong in the first half. Everything's going sideways. They're going to win the title. It's going to be comfortable. Side note, Jude Bellingham. My first day with my team in Sweden, in La Manga, Spain, preseason, there was a handball. We were playing. I was like, trying to prove myself. First day. And I was like, it's a fucking handball. Sorry, Tim. And the coach goes, me? No, fuck you. And I was like, whoa. And I was like, sorry, Tim. And I go, no. The word sorry, Tim, means it's like a verb, an adverb, an adjective, a noun, a pronoun. Like it's slang. You can use it with anything. Like I wasn't like trying to disrespect you. He goes, oh, okay. Because the word sorry, Tim, is like and it's a very bad word. Sorry, Tim. If there were bleeping Swedish words. And I was like, oh, okay, cool. So if he comes out and he says, it's a fucking goal. Sorry, Tim. I'm really cursing a lot now.
He's on a holiday. He's not going to like this.
Yeah. Well, whatever. The guy's taken like 7 holidays. It's amazing. It's like 2024 already. and he's on his seventh. That's the magic word. It doesn't matter what language you speak. You know that the F word's still the F word. And usually the F word is perceived as it's going to be a personal slight. Somebody, you're aggressively saying it. And he was aggressive because he was pissed because he felt like it was a goal. Here's my problem. As a former defender in the situation that Valencia, or as Marco said, Valencia, was in, you got to clear your lines. They didn't clear their lines. I knew as a defender, height, width, and distance. Kick the ball out of bounds, kick it towards the midfield stripe, get it on the other side. They didn't even clear their defensive third. If the referee did indeed say to a Valencia player that once the corner's cleared, I'm blowing the whistle, then so be it. But it never even got out of the 18-yard box. It never got out of the penalty area. Valencia wins the ball, plays it wide, no immediate pressure, very similar to Nottingham Forest and Liverpool. Ball serves in, Jude Bellingham rises like a salmon, great goal. And I believe they should have won. I'm not a Real Madrid guy. I'm a Barcelona. I like Barcelona more than I like Real Madrid, even though Barcelona is a complete disaster right now. But I don't believe that goal, because there, I don't know if you saw there was a tweet making the rounds, and it shows the goal from behind the AR in the near side.
Yeah.
Corner kicks whipped in, ball's punched, player brings it down, plays it wide. And literally the body language is like from the ref, he's on the line, he's running, he goes like, he looks over like, what are you doing? Why would you call that? And he looks back and it's a goal. So you know he blew the whistle. But they're like, they're going, I know it's all subjective, but why? Why would you blow the whistle when the ball hadn't even been cleared out of the 18-yard box? Yeah. I get it if it's like a million feet in the air, but it's just like,
but you can't keep playing till Real Madrid score. Like when time is up, right?
100%. But again, there was a VAR incident that was in there. There's a lot of subjectivity. It was like what, 5 seconds, 6 seconds past what the fourth official has shown. I just feel like you got to let them clear their lines. They didn't clear their lines. Whatever. Yeah. I would have thought as a Valencia player, oh, we didn't clear our lines. They're going to whip another ball in. Sorry, Tim. That's what I would have thought in that situation.
What about the Valencia manager coming on at the whistle and looking a little bit like he's just dodged a bullet? He would just let his girlfriend out of the hotel room before the wife turned up, and he was like,
"Oh boy,
hello, love, you all right? You know that little yeah. I've just got away with that. I can't believe that. Hello, darling, you all right? Yeah, should we go for dinner?" And he's still just like wiping lipstick off his collar. Like, fantastic. The way he just sort of styled it out. I was very impressed by that. That's something I've seen in TV, not lived in real life. Mainly because
Rennie. Sure.
Are you insane? 2 of them in one life? Are you insane? Okay, one final thing I did want to put to you before we run out of time. And it comes from German football, right? And it's this Darmstadt fan.
I saw this. It's another one of my downs. You're picking my brain.
I may have looked
ultra,
but I don't like ultras culture. I really don't like it. It's just allowed a bunch of ridiculous right-wing fascist people to take over the fandom of football clubs and give us like their beliefs when I just want to watch the football. Right, pisses me off. Oh, isn't it funny they stole Spalletti's steering wheel to leave the club? No, it's not funny. It's a crime, and they should have been arrested for it. Whatever, it's not funny. Now, I had a good exchange with our friend Kevin Hatchard. I love Kevin Hatchard, incredibly talented broadcaster, knows German football really, really well. And he posted this video early on. If you haven't seen it, Darmstadt at bottom of the Bundesliga. They lost 6-0 at home at the weekend to Augsburg, I think. And some ultra is on the pitch and he's basically berating the players. You know, you're not doing it for the shirt, all that sort of stuff. Like, and he is standing there, shirt on backwards, screaming at them, just so demonstratively. Like, it's just so demonstrative, right? It's so strong. The players are having to stand there and listen to this fucking guy. Sorry, Tim, who is just like, he looks like the wife's left him and taken the kids, right? He hasn't got a life. He's a total fucking loser. Sorry, Tim. And he's basically there just thinking he can berate these footballers because they're not playing as well as he would like. And people are like, oh, you know, that's fan culture. That's how invested fans are in their team in Germany. Fans are invested in their team everywhere. I think when West Ham lose, I have the right to complain about them. I don't think I have the right to go on the field and tell Kurt Zuma I hate him and he's not doing enough for me. I don't find it acceptable.
Now, Thilo Kehrer, on the other hand.
Thilo Kehrer, on the other hand, can go screw himself. But like, I don't find it acceptable. I don't find it heartwarming. I don't find it endearing. I don't find it to be isn't that a ringing endorsement for German football culture? And
Mm.
I kind of am a bit concerned by the fact, Dunny, this sort of gets written off as, hey, that's how the Germans do it. And I think
Yeah.
I wouldn't stand there as a professional and listen to this wazzock shout at me.
Yeah, I went back and I actually looked, and I believe it started around 2000. They were even relegated maybe the fourth division, and then were promoted to the Bundesliga. Stayed up the first year, I believe, in 14th position by the skin of their teeth. Went down the next season, and have been in Bundesliga too. Promoted this season, and again, listen, I can understand the culture. I was in Germany at Bayer Leverkusen in '98 for 3 months. I saw it up close and personal. I've seen the culture around the world for different teams and what it looks like. I can remember being up in Sweden where it was like a Tuesday or Wednesday, and we were out to lunch as a team, just a couple of guys, and there was a beer on the table because one of the players' buddies came and joined us. And a guy walked up and he says, "No beer for you. You have the derby on the weekend." And I was like, "Oh, okay, cool. Like, I get it. You're representing the city, you're representing the club." But it's different if you're not a player that grew up within the system, grew up in the city, grew up as a one club man. It's just different nowadays. So when I saw it, I was like, well, let's reel this back a little bit. Like, who do you really want them to be? What are they really capable of being? Because they're not even a yo-yo Bundesliga team. They're a Bundesliga team that's been promoted 3 occasions, but they've really gone back down immediately or almost immediately. And that's what's going to happen this year, or at least it seems as if it's going to happen this year for Darmstadt. I get that you just got whacked 6-0. But to your point, I think it's similar to what we talk about with referees. I think there's a very fine line that you got to be very, very careful. Like, number one, who allowed that to happen? Number two, where was stadium security? Number three, what in the world were the higher ups doing at Darmstadt, allowing this guy to step on the field? And number four, for this to be so gleefully pushed around the internet as look at our culture. Yeah, can you imagine if this happens in the Premier League? Can
Yeah.
you imagine if
it was
this?
me? Imagine after West Ham lost to Arsenal and me as like a West Ham ultra was allowed on the field to berate
Yeah,
the players afterwards.
yeah,
I just
it's
can't
crazy.
envisage it. It's not endearing. It's not
Yeah,
a good thing. He's just some guy. This is their job. They already feel humiliated.
yeah.
What does this? What does it get you? I don't find this acceptable in any way.
I would agree with you. I can understand the fury. I can understand getting to the point, the red mist. I can understand blood red, all of that. But I don't see from a player's perspective. I was watching and there's a close up, and I'm not aware of who the player was, but the guy with the shaved head,
Mm.
the big dude. And then, guys like clasping their hands, like trying to figure out, like, okay, don't show any emotion, don't show any emotion, or show the right emotion. Like, I was thinking, like, what would I do as a player in that situation? Like,
Would
obviously,
you walk?
the
Would you walk off? I would walk off. I
well,
feel I have
well,
to leave.
so
I mean, you've got to live in the city, right? So these
But
guys
so
might
I
be
was thinking
proper
about
hard
Everton.
nuts.
I was thinking about Everton. I was thinking about Yerry Mina. I was thinking about Anthony Gordon. I was thinking about a couple of years ago when the Everton fans, I don't want to say use the word accost, but they were certainly stopping the players. And that video of Yerry Mina getting an earful from some random fan, I was like, bloop, like knock his ass out. Like,
Yeah.
but then we saw it at Barcelona when Barcelona was going through all their things about when Samuel Etiti wouldn't sign a new deal, or when, oh, we're in financial despair. You got it. You can't take that 16 million that you owe or that you're owed because you've deferred it because of COVID. Like, I think about all these moments where, your potential safety outside of the stadium could be on the line. So I understand in the moment how you'd have to like really control your emotions, but I have a tough time thinking that there wasn't a single player on there that didn't want to knock this guy out.
Yeah. I kind of wish they did. But anyway, I don't need to worry about that. I'm not going to Darmstadt. Don't worry. Danny, we're out of time for this week. Always a pleasure, mate. Thank you very much indeed. That's Brian Dunsteth over there. I'm Tom Rennie. Tim Horsey produced the program whilst on holiday.
Allegedly.
Allegedly. If you're watching the program on YouTube, hello. You can also subscribe to this show as a podcast. If you're listening as a podcast, you can watch the entire thing on YouTube. Just search for Week in the Tackle. We'll see you next time.